She'd gotten used to silence until the sound of claws against wood changed everything. There's a certain hush that settles over Willow Creek, Oregon, when autumn begins to dim. The air turns cool enough to carry the smell of pine and smoke from someone's wood stove miles away. Along Alder Street, where porches lean and wind chimes sing softly as prayer bells, one house stands a little quieter than the rest. That house belongs to Margaret Lane. Every morning, she wakes before the sun lights the old kettle that takes forever to boil and watches the world through a lace curtain. Her cat, Oliver, always beats her to the window seat, stretching, yawning, then curling into a perfect circle of orange fur. His purr fills the small kitchen like a steady clock. Margaret once said that Oliver's company felt like having a heartbeat outside her own body. 5 years have passed since she lost her husband, and the rhythms of her life have grown simple, careful, and small. A cup of Earl Grey at 7, a crossword puzzle at 9. A walk to the mailbox at noon where the most excitement comes from the clatter of acorns underfoot. She's learned to fill her days with small kindnesses, feeding the blue jays, knitting scarves she'll never wear, leaving muffins at the library, drop-off for the staff. Her neighbors wave when they drive by, but the conversations never go deeper than weather or groceries. It isn't sadness exactly, it's habit, like a book left open on the same page for too long. But that morning, everything shifts. Margaret notices it first as a vibration beneath her cup of tea, then as a low mechanical rumble. A moving truck turns onto Alder Street and stops next door the house that's been empty for months, its for sale sign leaning like an exhausted soldier. From behind her curtain, Margaret watches. A man in his late 30s climbs out broad-shouldered, wearing a denim jacket that's seen real work. He moves with that particular kind of weariness that belongs to people starting over. He's followed by something stranger. 2 delivery workers slide open the truck door, and a large wooden crate appears. Inside, a pair of amber eyes catch the sunlight, eyes that do not belong to any dog. A low, wild growl vibrates through the crisp air. Margaret sets down her tea before she spills it. Oliver lifts his head, ears twitching, and lets out a warning hiss. The man crouches beside the crate, speaking in a tone so calm it feels almost sacred. The growl fades. Then gently, he lifts the latch. A bobcat steps out, sleek, muscled fur mottled in bronze and gray. Its tufted ears flick toward every sound. The creature pauses on the grass, sniffing the cold air, then turns its head toward Margaret's window as if sensing her watchful eyes. She gasps and pulls the curtain closed. Her heart beats faster than it has in months. Later that day, as the sun slips lower, Margaret sees the man Caleb Hart. She learns from a brief exchange with the mail carrier unloading boxes onto the porch. The bobcat is nowhere in sight now. Maybe it's inside. But the thought lingers like static in the air. That night, she couldn't focus on her book. Oliver senses her restlessness and hops onto her lap, kneading softly. "It's all right," she murmurs. "It's probably tame. Somehow." But the word tame feels wrong on her tongue. Willow Creek isn't the sort of town where wild animals share fences with widows. The biggest excitement last year was a stray deer caught in someone's backyard. Still, curiosity pulls stronger than fear. The next morning, Margaret bakes banana bread, something she does whenever she doesn't know what else to do, and carries it next door. The smell of sawdust greets her before she knocks. Caleb opens the door with a startled look, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes are gentle, but guarded like someone unused to kindness. "I thought you might need some breakfast fuel," she says, holding out the loaf. His smile is small but real. "That's mighty nice of you, ma'am. I'm Caleb. I'm Margaret. I live just there." Behind him, she catches a glimpse of movement, fur low to the ground. The bobcat steps into view, its golden eyes curious, not hostile. A faint scar runs across its shoulder. "She's called Sable," Caleb explains quickly. "Rescue from a rehab center. Still healing, still wild." Margaret nods, torn between fascination and disbelief. "She's beautiful," she manages. "Beautiful and unpredictable," he replies softly. "A bit like life, I guess." When Margaret returns home, she finds Oliver perched by the window tail, swishing in irritation. Across the yard, Sable prowls the fence line, nose lifted to the scent of a new territory. For a moment, the two animals lock eyes. One house cat, one wild, and Margaret holds her breath. Then Sable turns away, disappearing behind a row of ferns. The encounter leaves Margaret strangely awake. The air smells sharper, the world feels nearer. Even the sound of the kettle seems louder, as though the house itself has stirred from its long nap. That evening, the first of what will later be remembered as 3 evenings, 1 porch. Margaret sits outside with a blanket around her shoulders. The maple tree above her glows crimson in the streetlight. Caleb steps onto his porch across the way, nursing a mug of coffee. Their eyes meet briefly. Then he lifts the mug in greeting. "Beautiful night," she calls. He nods. Sable's asleep for once. That counts as a miracle. Margaret laughs, a soft, surprised sound she hasn't heard from herself in a while. They talk across the narrow yards about simple things, the weather, the stubborn raccoons that get into trash cans, the sound of trains at midnight. Nothing deep, but something about his voice feels steadying, like the first note of a song she thought she'd forgotten. When she finally goes inside, Oliver trails behind her, purring louder than usual. Over the next few days, life on Alder Street finds a new rhythm. Margaret sees Caleb building shelves in his garage, Sable lounging nearby on a sun-warmed patch of floor. Sometimes the bobcat's tail flicks in time with a hammering, as if keeping rhythm. Neighbors whisper, of course. A wild animal next door invites speculation. But Margaret notices something no one else does, the tenderness in the way Caleb moves around Sable, the patience, the space he gives her. It reminds her of how George used to handle broken things, never with force, always with care. And she begins to wonder if healing for both humans and animals might look more like quiet presence than quick repair. One afternoon, as Margaret hangs laundry, she catches sight of Sable watching her from across the fence. The bobcat's gaze isn't threatening, it's thoughtful. A leaf drifts between them, red and trembling, landing in the space that divides wild from tame. Margaret bends, picks up the leaf and smiles. "We're both getting old, Maple," she murmurs to the tree. "Maybe it's time to see what's still alive out there." A week later, rain sweeps through Willow Creek. Margaret walks to the store under her yellow umbrella, the one George bought her years ago. On her way back, she passes Caleb's house and sees him struggling with a broken porch step. Without thinking, she calls out, "You'll splinter that board if you hammer it like that." He laughs. "You know your carpentry, my husband did. I just remember the sound of things being fixed." Caleb hands her the hammer with a grin. "Maybe you should teach me then." For the next 10 minutes, they work side by side, the widow and the stranger both finding comfort in the rhythm of small tasks. When the step finally sits firm, Margaret feels an unexpected surge of warmth in her chest. That night, as she settles into bed, she thinks maybe some silences aren't meant to last forever. What Margaret doesn't know yet is that she and Caleb have both been living behind invisible fences, the kind built not from wood or wire, but from fear grief, and the belief that it's too late to start again. And sometimes all it takes to open the gate is the arrival of something wild. The bobcat next door isn't just a creature out of place. She's a mirror reminding Margaret that gentleness and courage can live side by side. When we reach a certain age, people start to speak to us softly as if we're already fading. But what if instead we're just gathering ourselves for one more vivid season? In towns like Willow Creek, change doesn't come with fanfare. It comes as a new sound in an old house, the scrape of claws on wood, the echo of a stranger's voice saying, "Good morning." For Margaret, that sound is both unsettling and hopeful. It reminds her that life still has room to surprise her. And for Caleb, moving into this quiet street with his half-wild companion, it's the start of something he hasn't had in years, a sense of belonging. As dusk falls, the wind picks up, rustling the maple leaves until they scatter like sparks across both yards. Oliver presses against the window tail, twitching. Outside, somewhere near the fence, Sable lets out a low, throaty cry, a wild song that ripples through the dark. Margaret sets down her teacup, heart thrumming. She doesn't know it yet, but that cry marks the true beginning of everything that will follow. Have you ever lived beside something or someone you didn't understand at first, only to realize they were exactly what your heart needed? If so, tell me their story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear it tonight. They said he lived with a bobcat, but the truth was it was his own heart he was learning to tame. A week had passed since the moving truck left Alder Street, and the neighborhood had already adjusted to the quiet presence of the man next door. He worked mostly in silence, the hum of a saw or the thud of a hammer breaking the calm only now and then. But every so often a wild cry drifted across the yards, a low, throaty sound that made the hair on the back of Margaret's neck stand up. It wasn't frightening anymore, just new. Sometimes she'd pause in the middle of sweeping the porch or folding laundry listening. The cry always came from Caleb's garage, where she'd caught glimpses of him moving with a certain careful rhythm, checking, waiting, stepping back. And there behind him, the faint outline of Sable the bobcat pacing. Willow Creek was a small town. It didn't take long for whispers to circle the bobcat. Right in the neighborhood. Is that even legal? What if it gets loose? Margaret tried not to feed into the talk. She'd seen the way Caleb handled Sable, the patience in his voice, the soft tone he used. He wasn't a man chasing danger. He was someone trying to mend what had been broken, and that she understood all too well. Caleb had moved to Willow Creek after walking away from a life that no longer fit him. He used to work for a wildlife rehabilitation center outside Portland, a place built on good intentions and long hours. But after a series of funding cuts and one devastating accident that cost the life of an animal he'd been caring for, he'd left. Not because he stopped believing in second chances, but because he stopped believing he deserved one. Willow Creek offered him a kind of anonymity. A small rental house with a leaky roof, a job repairing fences and porches, and a chance to quietly nurse both his wounds and Sable's. Sable had been injured by a car and rescued from the roadside with a shattered leg and deep fear of humans. The sanctuary where she stayed needed someone experienced enough to help her heal without destroying the part of her that still belonged to the wild. Caleb volunteered, and when the center temporarily closed for renovations, he brought her here to Willow Creek. It was meant to be short-term, but like many things we think are temporary, it began to grow roots. One Saturday morning, Margaret stepped out to water her potted ferns and found Caleb kneeling by his porch sanding a piece of cedar. "Morning," she called. He looked up, smiled faintly. "Morning, Miss Lane." "Margaret," she corrected gently. He nodded. "Margaret." After a pause, she asked, "And how's your guest Sable?" His smile warmed, though his eyes still held that edge of caution. "She's doing better, starting to put weight on the leg again." Margaret hesitated, then said, "If you don't mind me asking, how does one even live with a bobcat?" He chuckled softly, not offended. "You don't live with them. You live around them. It's all about trust. You don't force it, you earn it inch by inch." He spoke simply, but there was something in his tone that made her think he wasn't just talking about animals. Later that afternoon, the sky turned gray and the scent of rain filled the air. From her kitchen, Margaret could see through her window Caleb standing in his backyard, gently coaxing Sable to step onto a patch of grass. A drizzle had started, and the bobcat looked uncertain, her paws hesitating at the threshold. Caleb crouched, murmuring something she couldn't hear. His hand stayed low, not reaching out, just there, steady and patient. Slowly, Sable took one step, then another, the raindrops glinting in her fur. It was a simple moment, but it struck Margaret like a memory, the way George used to coax their old cat Penny out from under the couch after thunderstorms. The same quiet patience, the same refusal to rush trust. Watching Caleb and Sable, she felt something loosen inside her chest, a kind of ache that wasn't painful, just long delayed. That evening, she found herself baking again. Not because she needed something sweet, but because she wanted to do something kind. The next day, she brought over 2 small loaves of pumpkin bread. When he opened the door, she caught the smell of cedar shavings and the faint musk of the bobcat's bedding. "For your breakfast," she said lightly. "And perhaps one for Sable, though she doesn't strike me as the muffin type." Caleb laughed, a genuine surprised sound. "You'd be right. She prefers rabbit." Margaret smiled. "Then it's all yours." He accepted it with that same modest gratitude she'd seen before. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said. "But I wanted to." He hesitated, then gestured toward the porch. "You can sit if you'd like. I'll make coffee." And so she did. It wasn't anything grand. Just two people sitting under the eaves, steam rising from chipped mugs, rain whispering across the yard. But for Margaret, it felt almost sacred. Sable appeared near the doorway, watching with unblinking eyes. Margaret didn't flinch this time. Caleb noticed and said softly, "She's more curious than dangerous. Most wild things are." Margaret nodded, understanding more than she could say. Sometimes what frightens us isn't what's unfamiliar, it's what reminds us of ourselves. Margaret realized that Sable's restlessness mirrored her own, the pacing in the small hours, the need for freedom mixed with fear of being alone. And Caleb, with his quiet patience, seemed to be teaching both of them the same lesson, that healing doesn't happen through control. It happens through space, kindness, and time. The three of them, in their own ways, were trying to remember how to belong. In small towns like Willow Creek, people often think they know the difference between wild and domestic, between safe and strange. But lines blur when you look closely. The truth is, every heart has its wildness, something untamed that refuses to be fenced in. For Margaret, it was the part of her that still believed life could surprise her. For Caleb, it was the piece of him that longed to care again even after loss. And for Sable, it was the primal need to trust without losing her instincts. Sometimes it takes all three kinds of courage, the tender, the steady, and the wild, to build a quiet kind of love. A few days later, Margaret heard hammering again, followed by a loud crash. She peeked through her window to see Caleb sitting on the ground, surrounded by broken boards. The fence he'd been repairing had collapsed completely. Without thinking, she grabbed her raincoat and walked over. "Looks like that fence decided to retire early," she joked. He sighed, brushing sawdust from his hands. "Guess I misjudged the old wood. Happens more than I'd like. Want some help?" He raised an eyebrow. "You offering? I've got free afternoons and an extra hammer. Why not?" For the next hour, they worked together in companionable silence. She held the boards steady while he nailed them in place. Each thud of the hammer echoed like a slow heartbeat through the misty air. When the last board finally stood straight, Caleb leaned back and said, "Thank you." "Don't thank me," she replied. "It's your fence." He smiled. "Maybe, but it feels like your kindness held it up." It was a small thing fixing a fence, but small things done with care often rebuild what big things once broke. That evening, Sable lounged by the repaired fence tail, flicking lazily, her gaze softening when Margaret passed by. Trust, it seemed, was spreading like ivy, quietly taking hold. The first snow arrived early that year. Caleb knocked on Margaret's door with 2 mugs of hot cocoa, saying, "Thought you might like company." Powers flickering again. They sat wrapped in blankets on the porch, watching snow settle over the maple branches. Sable slept near the steps, a blur of warm fur against white. "I used to think peace meant stillness," Margaret said. "But maybe it just means being okay with movement, the changing, the coming and going." Caleb nodded. "Wild things teach you that. You can't hold them. You just meet them where they are." The snow kept falling silent and endless. Somewhere inside, a door opened wider for both of them. As winter deepened, the neighborhood quieted again. But beneath that calm, something new had taken root, a thread of connection woven between woman, man, and bobcat. And just as Margaret began to believe things might finally settle, a storm rolled in from the mountains. One night, thunder shook the windows. In the chaos of wind and rain, Margaret heard it again, the low, wild cry from next door. Only this time it wasn't contained. When she looked out the window, the gate to Caleb's yard was swinging open. Sable was gone. Have you ever met someone or something that reminded you how to trust again? Share that memory below. Sometimes the smallest stories can help someone else find their way back to hope. It was the storm that woke her, but it was the silence after that that told her something was wrong. Rain drummed against the roof of Alder Street, wind pushing through the tall pines that lined the hill like sentinels. Margaret lay awake, counting the seconds between the lightning and the thunder the way George once taught her. 3 seconds, then 2, then none. The sky cracked open with a sound so sharp it rattled the glass in her windows. Oliver leapt off the bed, tail, puffed ears pinned back. He crouched by the door, growling low, That was when Margaret heard it, a single metallic clang from outside, then a hollow bang that echoed down the alley. She threw on her robe and looked out the window. Caleb's yard was a blur of rain and motion. The gate, the one he'd reinforced just weeks ago, was swinging open, the padlock dangling uselessly from its latch. Her heart dropped. Sable was gone. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind that strange stillness that follows chaos. The air smelled of wet cedar and mud. Margaret found Caleb already in the yard, soaked to the bone, flashlight still in hand. His truck door hung open, maps spread across the seat, coffee gone cold. She broke through the latch sometime after midnight, he said quietly, eyes fixed on the tree line. The noise must have scared her. She'll come back, won't she? Margaret asked, her voice small. He didn't answer right away. Bobcats are creatures of instinct. If she's hurt or scared, she might run farther than she should. Margaret felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She offered what help she could, a thermos of hot tea, a flashlight with new batteries, a promise to watch the road, but Caleb barely paused. I have to find her before the sun goes down. Coyotes roam near the ridge this time of year. He started toward the woods, calling softly into the mist, Sable. Come on, girl. Margaret watched until his figure disappeared among the trees. The sound of his voice carried faintly through the fog, steady, desperate echoing. For the rest of that day, Margaret couldn't sit still. She checked the windows, the porch, the fence line. Oliver paced, too unsettled by her restlessness. By evening, when Caleb still hadn't returned, she pulled on her coat and decided to go after him. The trail behind the houses wound down toward Willow Creek proper, a narrow path where the ground was soft from rain and the air smelled of earth and moss. She hadn't walked this far in years. At one bend, she caught sight of Caleb kneeling near a patch of mud, studying paw prints half filled with rainwater. His flashlight beam trembled slightly in the fog. Anything, she asked, stepping closer. He looked up, startled, then sighed. Tracks, yes. But no sign of her. Margaret handed him a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. You'll think better with food. He smiled faintly. You really didn't have to. I wanted to, she said, cutting him off gently. Seems that's becoming a habit with you. They ate standing there, the only sound the dripping of rain from the branches. After a while, Caleb spoke again. You ever lose something that made you wonder who you were without it? Margaret looked toward the creek. Yes, she said softly. I did, and I still do. It wasn't a question, but he nodded as if he understood. There's a particular ache that comes from searching for something you love in the dark. It's not just fear, it's the helplessness of knowing you can't explain to the thing you love that you're trying to help. For Margaret, that night brought back too many memories. George's last hospital stay, waiting by a phone that never rang soon enough. The feeling was the same, a hollow in the chest, a need to do something when there's nothing to be done. But wait. For Caleb, it was failure all over again. He'd promised the sanctuary he could handle Sable's rehabilitation. He'd promised himself he wouldn't lose another animal. 2 people, different storms, same grief. When you live long enough, you learn that not all rescues look like heroics. Sometimes rescue means simply showing up beside someone who's trying, standing in the mud with them, holding the flashlight steady so they can see where to step next. That's what Margaret did. She followed Caleb through the damp woods, their boots sinking into the soft earth. They called Sable's name until their voices were hoarse. At one point, Caleb stopped and stared into the dark. If she's gone too far, she won't make it. The ridge drops off near the highway. Margaret touched his sleeve. You don't know that yet. He looked at her. Really looked the way you do when someone speaks a truth you wish you believed. The search went on until the sky bruised with dusk. When they finally turned back, Margaret's legs trembled from fatigue, but she didn't complain. Come on, she said. We'll start again tomorrow. He nodded, silent. The next morning, the whole neighborhood knew about the missing bobcat. Whispers turned to worry and worry to action. Eli, the 10-year-old who lived across the street, volunteered to help post flyers. Mr. Owens from the hardware store offered extra flashlights and rope. Nurse Carla stopped by with sandwiches and insisted Caleb rest for at least an hour. Kindness, Margaret thought, was contagious even when fear tried to take its place. She spent that afternoon on her porch, cutting out pictures of Sable for the flyers. The maple tree shed its last few red leaves, scattering them across her lap like blessings. By evening, Caleb returned from another fruitless day. His eyes were hollow, his clothes streaked with mud. "I can't keep asking people to look," he said. "They've done enough." Margaret handed him a folded map. "Then it's just us." He stared at her a little in awe. "You'd really come out there again?" She smiled. "You once said trust is earned inch by inch. Seems fair to give you back a few inches." Miles away, beneath the shelter of the pines, the bobcat crouched near the edge of a creek. The night air was cold, her breath visible in quick, sharp clouds. She could smell rainwater and something else familiar. A human scent she didn't fear anymore. The camera lingers at her eye level, moonlight reflecting off the current droplets on whiskers, the rhythmic pulse of life continuing even in isolation. Somewhere in the distance, a man's voice calls her name again. She pauses, then takes a hesitant step toward the sound. Back in town, Margaret dreams of the same forest. She doesn't know why, but she wakes with a feeling she can't explain, a sense that something fragile but alive is still reaching back. The next day, a local ranger joins the search. Caleb rides in the passenger seat of the ranger's truck while Margaret follows behind in her sedan, determined despite her age. They drive until the road narrows into a dirt path. It's near dusk when Eli's voice crackles through the ranger's radio. "I think I saw her, down by the creek." Caleb's heart leaps. They race to the spot, headlights cutting through the fog, and there, under a canopy of fir trees, Sable crouches, mud-streaked but alive. Margaret spots something else too, a flash of orange beside her. Oliver. Somehow he's wandered from home, drawn by curiosity or concern. Sable stands over him, protectively, hackles raised but body still. Caleb freezes. "Don't move," he whispers. The scene holds a wild bobcat guarding a house cat, both trembling but unharmed. Then, slowly, Sable steps back, eyes on Caleb. Recognition flickers there, a fragile bridge built over weeks of patience. He kneels, voice breaking. "Come on, girl, let's go home." Sable lowers her head, takes one step forward, then another, until she's close enough for him to slip the harness around her shoulders. Oliver meows, indignant but safe. For the first time in days, Margaret laughs through tears. "She saved him," she says. Caleb nods, unable to speak. Sometimes the wild doesn't destroy, it protects. Sometimes the thing we fear most is exactly what teaches us gentleness. That night, Margaret couldn't shake the image, the bobcat standing guard over her small, spoiled cat, both creatures shivering under the same rain. Maybe love, she thought, isn't about taming anything at all. Maybe it's about learning to stand beside what we don't yet understand. Loss, it turns out, can be a doorway. In searching for what's gone, we often find the parts of ourselves we thought had vanished too. Caleb found his courage again in those woods. The courage to care, to risk attachment, to believe in second chances. Margaret found her strength, the reminder that she was still capable of stepping into the unknown for someone else's sake. And Sable, wild as she was, found safety not through confinement, but through connection. Theirs was a quiet miracle, the kind that doesn't make headlines but leaves a mark on everyone who witnesses it. By the time they returned to Alder Street, the sky had cleared. The maple tree gleamed with raindrops that caught the porch light like tiny lanterns. Sable slept inside Caleb's house that night, curled near the door. Oliver, for reasons known only to him, took his usual spot on Margaret's windowsill, closer to the sound of the wild than he'd ever been before. For the first time, both homes shared the same rhythm of breath. But peace never stays untouched for long. And before winter was over, another storm, one far quieter and far more dangerous, would come for Margaret herself. Have you ever gone searching for something you loved, only to find something deeper waiting along the way? Tell me about it in the comments. Someone listening tonight might need your story to find their own way home. Sometimes peace doesn't arrive with a handshake. It comes quietly through mud, rain, and the beating of two frightened hearts that finally learn to trust. The day they found Sable by the creek became something folks in Willow Creek would talk about for months. Not because of the search or the storm or even the miracle that a wild bobcat could return home without hurting a soul. It was what happened after that that lingered. Margaret stood at the edge of the clearing, her breath clouding in the cool air. Beside her, Caleb knelt in the wet leaves, one hand resting gently on Sable's harness, the other brushing against Oliver's trembling back. The two animals, so different, so unlikely, stood side by side, mud-spattered and exhausted. Sable's golden eyes met Oliver's amber ones, and in that quiet exchange something passed between them. Not friendship exactly, but an understanding, a truce born from shared fear and survival. Margaret felt a lump rise in her throat. She could have hurt him, she whispered. Caleb shook his head. She didn't. She chose not to. He said it softly, but the words carried weight. Choices like that meant something, especially when made by creatures the world called wild. They brought both animals home that evening, driving slowly through streets slick with rain. The truck heater hummed, filling the cab with warmth and the faint scent of wet fur. Sable rested in the back seat, her breathing even. Oliver sat on Margaret's lap, tail twitching but calm. For the first time, the boundaries between their two homes, the fences, the fear, the uncertainty, felt smaller. Once home, Caleb set out clean towels, coaxed Sable into a dry spot near the fireplace, and gave her a bowl of water. Margaret stayed to help her hands steady, despite the fatigue that trembled through her. Oliver, ever the observer, sat a few feet away, watching the bobcat with wary curiosity. "She won't go after him?" Margaret asked. Caleb smiled faintly. "Not tonight. They've seen each other in the storm. That changes things." Margaret nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Then again, she'd seen something change too, not just in Sable, but in herself. The next morning, the air was washed clean. Mist hung over the creek, and the maple tree in Margaret's yard glittered with raindrops like tiny stars. She found herself walking next door without really deciding to. Caleb was already outside, mending the section of fence that had broken. He looked up, gave a tired smile, and said, "You didn't have to come." She handed him a thermos. "You say that a lot." He chuckled. "Old habit, I guess." As he worked, she noticed Sable sitting by the porch, her leg bandaged, but no longer limping. Oliver sat nearby, the two animals separated only by a few cautious feet. Every so often, Sable flicked her tail, and Oliver's ears twitched in response, a conversation without words. "They're learning," Caleb said quietly. "Learning what? That's not everything." "Different is dangerous." Margaret looked at him, realizing he was talking about more than animals. "Sometimes healing sneaks up on us. It doesn't always announce itself with grand moments or tidy resolutions. More often, it's a small shift, a softer tone, a slower heartbeat, a shared silence that doesn't feel empty anymore. For Margaret, it came in those quiet mornings, pouring coffee, while hearing Caleb's hammer from next door, seeing Oliver watching Sable without fear. The edges of her solitude softened. For Caleb, it came through the gentle persistence of her kindness, the way she showed up with thermoses or muffins, or simply a listening ear when he didn't have words for his guilt. And for Sable, it came in the shape of familiarity, the rhythm of footsteps, the scent of home, the echo of trust returning to her bones. The wildness was still there, it always would be, but it had found a safe place to rest. It's easy to think of kindness as fragile. But maybe it's the strongest thing we have, the thread that holds everything together, when fear tries to tear it apart. Caleb used to believe he'd failed in his work because he couldn't save every animal. But here in this small town, beside a woman who carried her own quiet grief, he was learning that sometimes the saving isn't about the rescue. It's about staying. And Margaret, who once thought her best years had already passed, was beginning to see that love and purpose don't disappear with age, they just change shape. Sometimes they arrive as friendship, sometimes as a responsibility, sometimes like Sable as something wild that chooses to stay close. A week after the Creekside rescue, Caleb came by Margaret's house, carrying a tool bag. "You mentioned your handrail was loose," he said. She waved him in, pretending it wasn't a big deal. But she noticed how careful he was, how he tested the wood first, tightened each screw, wiped away the dust. When he was done, she said, "You could make a living fixing things like this." He shrugged. "Maybe that's all I've ever done, just fix things that can't talk back." She laughed softly. "That's not true. You fixed something in me." He paused, looking at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then I guess that makes us even." That evening, as she sat on the porch with Oliver in her lap, Sable appeared near the fence. She didn't come closer, but she didn't retreat either. For a long moment, their eyes met, wild and domestic, two lives that had found a rhythm in coexistence. Margaret smiled. "Evening, Sable," she said quietly. The bobcat blinked once, slow and deliberate, before turning toward the woods. Snow began to fall a few nights later, light at first, then steady. The world hushed under it, the kind of silence that feels sacred. Caleb came over with 2 mugs of cocoa steam curling into the cold air. They sat side by side on her porch, watching snow gather on the maple's bare branches. "I used to dread winters," Margaret said. "Too quiet, too long. And now," Caleb asked, "now I think maybe quiet isn't the same as lonely." He nodded slowly. "You know, when I first took in Sable, I thought she'd never trust me. She'd flinch at every sound, every movement. I used to think I had to tame her, but that wasn't the point. What was? To let her be herself and still stay near." Margaret smiled, eyes soft. "That's what we all want, isn't it?" The porch light glowed golden against the falling snow. Inside, Oliver curled on the rug, his gentle purrs mixing with the muffled world outside. Over the next few days, Caleb began teaching Margaret small things about living alongside the wild. How to keep Sable's curiosity in check by leaving scents along the fence line, by speaking softly near her space. "It's not control," he explained. "It's communication. You build a rhythm together." Margaret realized how similar it was to relationships between people, the patience, the quiet boundaries, the steady effort to understand rather than fix. Each morning, she found herself repeating his words while feeding the birds. "You build a rhythm together." And somehow the world began to feel wider again. The storm that took Sable away had broken more than a gate. It had cracked open something inside both of them, a space that grief and routine had long covered over. Now that space was filling again. With trust, with care, with moments that didn't need to be labeled love to still feel like it. Margaret found herself humming while she cooked again. Caleb started leaving his workshop door open when he worked, letting the scent of sawdust drift across the yard. Even Sable seemed calmer, more at ease. The quiet of Alder Street wasn't empty anymore. It was full of small, living sounds, paws on wood, the whistle of a kettle, laughter carried on cold air. But peace, as always, is fragile. And sometimes life waits until you finally feel safe before reminding you how quickly things can change. It happened one night in late December. The air was sharp with frost. Margaret was preparing tea when she felt an ache spreading across her chest, sudden and deep. The mug slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. She reached for the phone, her breath shallow, her voice barely a whisper. "Caleb!" Across the yard, Sable stirred from sleep ears, twitching. Oliver yowled from the window, and for the second time that winter, the night would bring a rescue. Have you ever seen 2 lives, human or animal, find peace in each other's presence? Share that story below. It might remind someone tonight that understanding can bloom in the unlikeliest of places. When her heart gave way that winter night, it wasn't the sound of sirens that saved her. It was the rhythm of loyalty, love, and a wild animal's cry beneath her window. The snow had thickened by evening soft flakes, turning Alder Street into something almost holy. Margaret had just set her teacup on the counter when she felt the first tug beneath her ribs, a pressure that wasn't pain exactly, but wrong. She paused, a hand on her chest. It was only for a moment. Then the ache deepened. Oliver, who had been sprawled on the kitchen rug, lifted his head and meowed sharply, his tail twitching in alarm. Margaret took a slow breath, willing the sensation to pass, but it didn't. Her vision dimmed at the edges. The kettle hissed, the house seemed to tilt, and before she could call out, the world went gray. Outside, across the yard, Sable the bobcat, who had once feared every human sound, let out a guttural, haunting cry that sliced through the cold air. It was that cry that brought Caleb running. When he burst through the back door, snow trailing from his boots, the kettle was still steaming. Margaret lay crumpled beside the counter, her hand frozen mid-reach toward the phone. "Margaret!" he shouted, dropping to his knees. He could hear her shallow breaths, thin, irregular. He reached for his phone with trembling fingers and dialed 911. "This is 218 Alder Street," he said, voice cracking. "Elderly woman, possible heart attack. She's breathing but barely." The operator's voice came calm and steady, the way it always sounds when someone else's world is falling apart. "Is she conscious?" "Barely." "Stay with her. Keep her still. If she's awake, have her chew 1 aspirin if available." Caleb's mind raced. He scanned the counter there beside the tea tin, a bottle. "Aspirin," he muttered, shaking 1 tablet into his palm. "Margaret, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. He slipped the pill between her lips, holding a glass of water for her to sip. "Just hold on," he whispered. "Help's coming." Health literacy moment, the story doesn't slow down for it. It simply shows it. The aspirin dissolves. He times her breaths. He notes the seconds between each. The camera of narration lingers on his hands, steady, careful, human. Beside them, Oliver circles anxiously, his fur bristled, while through the open doorway, Sable paces along the snow, a shadow of movement under the porch light. When the faint sound of sirens finally reaches them, it feels like dawn breaking. Caleb follows the paramedics as they lift Margaret onto the stretcher. Her hand finds his wrist and squeezes weakly. "Don't let Oliver out," she murmurs. Her voice is barely audible. "I won't," he promises. "I'll stay with him. You just rest now." The ambulance door closes, and for a long second Caleb stands there, snow melting into his hair, the siren fading into the distance. He's never felt a street so quiet. Inside the house, the kettle has gone cold. He stays. All through the night, Caleb moves through Margaret's house as though guarding it. He tidies the broken mug wipes, the counter, and then sits in her armchair with Oliver on his lap. Sable lies just outside the window, pressed against the glass. Occasionally, she lifts her head, ears twitching as if listening for something unseen. The hours pass like this, 2 animals and a man waiting. The clock ticks softly each minute, stretching thin with worry. Loss has a way of teaching you silence. Caleb knew that silence well, the kind that comes after the last goodbye, when the room still carries the echo of a voice you'll never hear again. But this silence felt different. It was charged with hope, fragile and flickering but real. He thought of the countless nights he'd spent in wildlife rehab clinics, tending to injured creatures, whispering encouragement they couldn't understand. How similar this felt, holding space for something fragile, helpless, sacred. It struck him then that care, whether for a human or an animal, always begins the same way, with presence. Not perfection. Just being there when the world tilts off its axis. The hospital lights were harsh, sterile. Yet when Caleb arrived the next morning, he noticed something gentle in the way the nurse adjusted Margaret's blanket, how the machines hummed in rhythm with her shallow breathing. The doctor explained it had been a mild heart attack. "She's stable now," he said. Quick action made the difference. Caleb exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. When Margaret finally stirred, the light through the blinds was soft and golden. She blinked, confused, then saw him. "You stayed." "I told you I would," he said simply. Her lips trembled into the faintest smile. "And Sable home, guarding the porch. Oliver too." Margaret's eyes filled not with fear but with gratitude, the kind that humbles you to your bones. "You saved me," she whispered. Caleb shook his head. "We saved you?" Over the next week, Caleb visited daily. He brought flowers, simple ones from the local market, their stems wrapped in paper, and read aloud from the book she'd left half-finished on her table. He told her about the town's small acts of kindness, Nurse Carla stopping by to feed Oliver Eli, leaving a note on her porch that said, "Get better soon, Ms. Lane. The street misses you." Even Sable had grown restless, pacing the fence line each evening as if counting the days. When Margaret was finally discharged, the hospital staff gathered to say goodbye. Touched by the unusual sight that followed her wheelchair down the hall, a man carrying flowers in one arm, a photo of a bobcat in the other. The day she returned home, the maple tree in her yard shimmered with frost, every branch lined with light. Caleb had shoveled her walkway and hung a small wreath on her door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and fresh coffee. Oliver meowed in greeting, pressing against her leg. Near the window, Sable sat, watchful tail curled neatly around her paws. Margaret smiled through tears. Looks like I've got quite the welcoming committee. Caleb helped her settle into a chair, draped a blanket over her knees, and set the kettle to boil. Doctor says no stress, he reminded her. She chuckled softly. That might depend on how Oliver and Sable behave. Then I'll make sure they stay civil. He lingered in the doorway, hands shoved into his coat pockets. You scared me, you know. She looked up, her eyes kind. I scared myself too, but I think maybe I needed the reminder of what that being alive means, letting people in, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts. He nodded slowly, understanding. By the time March rolled around, the snow had melted into small streams that ran through the yards. On one soft golden evening, they sat again on Margaret's porch, she wrapped in a shawl, nursing a mug of coffee. Sable lay in the grass nearby. Oliver perched beside her on the porch step, his tail brushing her fur. Neither seemed to mind. They're getting along, Caleb said quietly. Margaret smiled. Took them long enough. Guess they just needed a reason to trust. Maybe we did too. The wind stirred the branches above them, carrying the scent of damp earth and new beginnings. Margaret turned to him, voice low but clear. You know, I used to think my life was winding down, but now it feels like it's widening instead. He nodded, eyes on the horizon. Funny how near death can do that. Funny, she agreed, and kind. They sat there until the light faded, two lives joined not by blood or romance, but by something steadier, the quiet kind of companionship that builds when you simply refuse to leave each other's side. Healing, Margaret realized, isn't about returning to what was. It's about finding peace with what is. The human heart, like any wild creature, can falter under too much fear. But it can also learn to beat again, to trust the steady rhythm of kindness that surrounds it. She thought of Sable, once terrified of every sound, now dozing peacefully near her cat. She thought of Caleb, once unsure of his purpose, now showing up at her door each morning with fresh bread and a smile that said, "You're not alone." And she thought of herself not as fragile, but as still becoming. As spring settled over Willow Creek, the world outside her window began to bloom again. The maple tree unfurled, new leaves green and trembling. Margaret's strength returned slowly. Each step was careful, each day a quiet victory. Caleb kept repairing small things around the house, though Margaret suspected it wasn't the hinges or boards he was really mending. It was the spaces between them all. But time, like nature, keeps moving. And soon a new season would test that bond, the kind of change that asks not whether love exists, but whether it endures. Have you ever been saved, not by grand gestures, but by someone simply staying beside you when it mattered most? Share that memory in the comments. It might remind someone out there that showing up can still change a life. The snow melted, the earth softened, and for the first time in years, the porch on Alder Street filled not with silence, but with laughter. When spring came to Willow Creek, it came all at once. The last of the frost disappeared overnight, replaced by the smell of wet earth and lilacs. Rainwater ran in silver lines down the streets, and the maple in Margaret's yard unfurled its first tender leaves, new green against the gray boards of her porch. Inside, Margaret moved more slowly than before. The heart attack had changed things, her pace, her limits, even her confidence. But what hadn't changed was her gratitude. Every morning she woke, breathed in the scent of coffee from the kitchen, and whispered to no one in particular, "Thank you for one more day." Across the yard, Caleb's tools clinked in rhythm. He'd taken to spending his mornings fixing what winter had broken: fence boards, loose shingles, small things that spoke of care. He said it was just work, but Margaret knew better. It was his way of tending to what mattered. Sable followed him like a shadow, her gait even again, the limp barely visible now. Oliver, never far behind, trailed along the fence line, pretending to ignore her, but always keeping pace. Their easy companionship had become something of a neighborhood curiosity, the wild and the gentle people said. But to Margaret, they were proof that peace was possible when fear gave way to trust. Spring was rebuilding them all. For Caleb, it meant rediscovering purpose. He'd been offered a job in Portland, a good one, steady pay, clean slate, but every time he pictured leaving, something in his chest tightened. The city. The pace. The noise, it all felt like a life that didn't fit anymore. Willow Creek, in its quiet, had given him something back he didn't know. He'd lost a reason to stay still. And for Margaret, recovery came in layers. Some days she could climb the porch steps without stopping. Others, she'd pause halfway, resting her hand on the rail Caleb had strengthened for her. But no matter how slow the climb, she kept at it. She was learning that healing isn't about erasing weakness. It's about trusting your strength to grow around it. One morning, Caleb knocked on her door, carrying a paper bag. "Breakfast delivery," he said, holding up a bundle of warm biscuits. Margaret smiled. "You're becoming dangerous with that skillet of yours." "I had a good teacher," he said. "My grandmother used to say, feed people before you try to fix them. Makes the fixing easier." They ate on the porch, the air cool but bright. Birds chattered in the maple's branches above them, and the smell of biscuits mingled with the scent of new rain. Margaret noticed a lightness in Caleb she hadn't seen before, an ease that came from doing something with his hands that mattered, even if it wasn't grand. "You've been working every day," she said. "Don't you ever rest?" He shrugged. "Rest comes easier when the day's been useful." She nodded. "That's true. George was the same way." "Your husband?" "Yes." He couldn't sit still, always had to mend, build, or plant something. He said stillness made him restless. I never understood that until lately. Caleb smiled softly. "Guess we're both learning from ghosts." Grief changes its shape over time. At first, it's a wound, sharp, raw, unrelenting. But slowly it becomes something gentler, like a stone you carry in your pocket. You still feel its weight, but it doesn't hurt the same way. Margaret was beginning to understand that. George wasn't gone. He'd simply moved into the quiet spaces of her days, the smell of sawdust, the creak of a porch board, the warmth of someone caring enough to fix what was broken. And Caleb, in his quiet steadiness, filled the silence without trying to erase it. Sometimes he didn't speak for long stretches, just worked nearby, humming under his breath. The sound soothed her, simple, grounding human. It was in those silences that she realized something she hadn't dared to name. She was no longer lonely. Life, she thought, is a little like spring. It doesn't ask for permission to begin again, it just does. We spend so much time fearing change, holding on to what's comfortable, that we forget new things can bloom from the wreckage of the old. The porch had become a kind of classroom for both of them, a place where small acts of kindness taught larger truths. Caleb learned that purpose doesn't need applause, it just needs consistency. Margaret learned that age doesn't end discovery, it simply slows it down enough to notice the beauty in it. And together they learned that love, whether platonic, familial, or something in between, doesn't demand youth. It only asks for sincerity. A few weeks later, Caleb received a call from the company in Portland, confirming the offer. He mentioned it to Margaret while repairing her front step. "They want me to start in April," he said, tightening a bolt. Margaret's hand stilled on her mug. "That's soon." He nodded. "It's a good opportunity, but he looked up. "I'm not sure I want it, because of Sable." "Because of this," he said, gesturing to the yard, the house, the maple tree between them. "Because it finally feels like home." Margaret smiled, though there was a tremor in it. Home has a way of finding us right when we stop chasing it. They didn't speak of it again that day. But later, when the sun dipped low and the porch light came on, Caleb lingered longer than usual before heading back across the yard. That week, Margaret decided to plant a few herbs in small pots along her porch rail, mint, thyme, rosemary. She called it her healing garden. Caleb built wooden boxes for them, and Eli, the neighbor boy, painted each with bright colors, green for hope, blue for calm, yellow for kindness. When Sable brushed past the boxes, her fur caught a sprig of thyme, scattering its fragrance through the air. Oliver followed, pawing playfully at a leaf. Margaret watched them and said half to herself, "Maybe love smells like this." Caleb looked up from his work, smiling. "What does it smell like?" "Warm earth," Something alive. He nodded slowly. Then maybe we're doing it right. There's something quietly sacred about shared work. Two people fixing a porch step, planting herbs, sipping coffee side by side. It doesn't look like healing, but it is. Margaret noticed how time seemed to slow on those afternoons. The sound of a saw blending with bird song, the gentle thump of Sable's paws, the steady ticking of her old clock from inside. It wasn't dramatic, but it was peaceful. To believe that peace was enough. One golden evening, when the first buds on the maple began to open, they sat together, watching the light shift across the yard. Funny, Margaret said. All those winters I thought the tree was dead, but it was just resting. Caleb nodded. We all need seasons of rest. She turned to him, smiling. And seasons, oh. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself company. He met her gaze, a quiet understanding passing between them. Neither spoke of love, but it was there in the shared laughter, in the tea refilled before it ran out, in the simple act of showing up. Caleb had started making small safety improvements around her home, non-slip mats, new lighting, and grab bars near the stairs. He explained them casually, never patronizing. These things aren't just for now, he said. They're for the days you'll want to keep living on your own. Margaret touched the railing he'd sanded smooth. You think I'll have many of those days left? He smiled. Plenty. You've still got spring cleaning to supervise, don't you? She laughed, a full, bright sound that carried down the quiet street. That night, after he left, Margaret lingered on the porch long after dark. The moonlight turned the maple leaves silver. Inside, Oliver slept soundly. Sable's shadow moved along the fence line, a silent guardian in the night. Margaret closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of her world, the creak of the porch boards, the soft rustle of fur, the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. She didn't know how many more springs she'd see, but she knew this one mattered because it was shared. The days grew warmer. The garden flourished. Caleb's decision about Portland lingered unspoken but certain. He wasn't leaving, not yet. And as life settled into its gentle rhythm, none of them, neither the man nor the widow, nor the animals that had become family, knew that their final season together had already begun. The maple would soon bloom brighter than ever before, and its petals would fall like blessings over a goodbye no one was ready to face. Have you ever had a season in your life that felt like healing, quiet, slow, but full of meaning? Share it below. Someone out there might need to be reminded that peace doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just hums softly on a porch in spring. The maple bloomed early that year, as if it knew someone's time was running short and wanted to make the world beautiful for her one last time. Spring had ripened into early summer, and Willow Creek shimmered in the long golden light of June. The air was full of sound bees moving lazily through the garden, the distant rush of the creek, the soft creak of porch boards under careful footsteps. Margaret was quieter these days. Not sad exactly, just slower, softer, as though her body had decided to move at the same rhythm as her heart. She'd started needing more rest, shorter walks, and longer naps by the window where Oliver always found his way to her lap. Caleb noticed, of course. He didn't mention it right away, just stayed longer after chores, brewed the tea himself, and fixed small things before she could ask. He'd learned that sometimes care wasn't about words, it was about presence. And on one of those long evenings, with the maple glowing above them in full green splendor, Margaret said softly, "It feels like the world's speeding up without me." Caleb looked at her for a long moment before replying, "Then maybe we just need to slow down with it." Everyone in Willow Creek felt the shift that summer. The widow on Alder Street, who had once been invisible behind her lace curtains, now had visitors almost daily. Neighbors dropping off soup. Eli biking by to bring her fresh daisies, Nurse Carla checking in on her blood pressure with a laugh and a scold. Caleb made sure her porch stayed swept, her garden watered, her groceries stocked. But beneath all the small talk and kindness, an unspoken truth settled between them. Time was beginning to run thin. Margaret never feared dying, not really. What she feared was leaving things undone, the words unsaid, the thanks unspoken, the people she loved left wondering if she'd truly known what she meant to them. So she began writing letters. One to Eli, the boy who'd found Sable that night by the creek. One to Nurse Carla, thanking her for the kind of care that feels like friendship. And one to Caleb, a letter she rewrote 3 times before tucking it into a small envelope sealed with a pressed maple leaf. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Margaret called Caleb over. "Bring your hammer," she said, a twinkle in her eye. When he arrived, she handed him a wooden birdhouse George had built decades ago. The paint had faded, the roof slightly warped. "I want to hang it again," she said. "The birds deserve a home." Caleb smiled gently. "You could have just asked me to do that." "I did," she replied, her eyes glinting. Just in a roundabout way. They worked together the way they always had. No rush, no need for many words. When the house was finally hung from the lowest branch of the maple, Margaret stepped back and whispered, "He'd be happy to see this." "I think he'd be happy to see you," Caleb said. She looked at him, then her gaze soft but certain. "You've been a good man, Caleb Hart. Don't forget that. There's a stillness that comes before goodbye. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that hums under the surface of ordinary days." Margaret could feel it in her bones, the slowing heartbeat, the way light seemed to linger longer on familiar corners, the sudden awareness of beauty in every small thing. She found herself memorizing details, the sound of Sable's paws against the porch steps, the scent of sawdust in Caleb's jacket, the texture of Oliver's fur under her palm. It wasn't fear that filled her, it was gratitude. A fullness so complete that it hurt. To live long enough to know love again, she thought, is more grace than anyone deserves. We tend to think of endings as losses, but sometimes they're simply openings in another direction. For Margaret, death wasn't an absence waiting to happen, it was a continuation of connection. She believed in that now. In the way George's memory had lived in the maple, in the way Sable's eyes reflected something human, in the way Caleb's kindness had become a bridge between loneliness and peace. And maybe she thought that was the true measure of a life, not how long it lasted, but how much light it left behind. The morning she knew her strength was fading fast. The porch was already warm with the sun. She sat wrapped in her shawl, a cup of tea trembling slightly in her hands. Caleb had gone into town for supplies. Sable lay under the maple's shadow, and Oliver purred by her feet. She looked out over her garden, the herbs growing wild and fragrant, and whispered, "You did good, George. We both did." Then, as if remembering something important, she rose slowly and walked to the edge of the porch. She bent down, scooping a single seed that had fallen from the maple, small, winged, full of promise. When Caleb returned that afternoon, she placed it in his palm. "For when I'm gone," she said, "plant it somewhere that gets morning light." He frowned, not wanting to hear the words. "Don't talk like that. I have to. Not everything unsaid should stay that way." He closed his hand around the seed. "Then I'll plant it right here. So you'll always have a view." Her smile was faint but steady. "Then I'll hold you to it." That evening, the sky turned the color of faded rose. Margaret sat on the porch one last time, the air thick with the scent of lilacs. Caleb joined her, their conversation quiet but full. They talked about simple things, the way spring water tastes sweeter than bottled, the sound of rain on the roof, the miracle of a bobcat who'd learned to nap beside a cat. When he stood to leave, she reached for his hand. "Promise me you'll keep the porch alive," she said. "I will. And promise you'll let Sable roam free when I'm gone. She's not meant to be caged." He nodded, his throat too tight to speak. As he walked away, Sable rose, padding silently to the porch steps. She watched him cross the yard, then looked back at Margaret, her golden eyes catching the last of the light. That night, Margaret drifted to sleep, listening to the wind moving through the maple leaves. By morning, the house was still. The town gathered quietly that week. No grand procession, no formality. Just neighbors and friends standing under the maple as sunlight filtered through the branches. Caleb spoke simply. "She taught me that kindness doesn't have to be loud to change your life." Eli placed a small vase of daisies on the porch rail. Nurse Carla wiped her eyes. Even Sable was there, sitting near the steps, calm and unafraid. When it was over, Caleb found the envelope Margaret had left for him on the kitchen table. Inside was a single page written in her careful hand. You gave me back the sound of laughter in my house, the warmth of a friend beside me, and the peace of knowing I was never truly alone. Plant the seed, let the tree grow tall. When it blooms, you'll know I'm home. Grief came in waves after that, gentle but constant. Yet even in sorrow, there was gratitude. Caleb realized that love doesn't disappear when someone's gone. It lingers in gestures and habits, in places touched by shared living. Every time he brewed tea or fixed a loose hinge or saw the cats curled together by the window, he felt her presence. And every spring, when the maple burst into color again, he felt it most of all. Death doesn't end love. It simply asks it to change form. For Caleb, Margaret's absence became a quiet calling to keep showing up, to keep choosing gentleness, to live as proof that kindness never really dies. That's what grief can do. It turns us into carriers of someone else's light. A few weeks later, on a soft April morning, Caleb planted the maple seed beside the porch. Oliver circled it once, brushing against his leg. Sable lay nearby, head resting on her paws. He whispered, "She'd like this spot." The soil crumbled easily between his fingers, dark and cool. He covered the seed, patted it gently, and sat back. As the sun rose higher, its rays spilled over the porch, touching everything she had loved. He looked at the growing sapling and smiled, the ache in his chest easing just a little. Have you ever lost someone who left their kindness living quietly inside you? Share that memory below. Sometimes the stories we tell about love and loss help others remember that even endings can carry warmth. The season turned again, and life on Alder Street found its rhythm, but under the porch light, a single seed was quietly becoming a tree. It was early autumn when Caleb noticed the first new leaf pushing through the soil, a tender green trembling in the wind. He crouched beside it, brushing away a few fallen maple leaves. "You made it," he whispered. She'd be proud. The seed Margaret had given him months before had taken root right where she'd asked, beside the porch steps in a patch of morning light. It wasn't much yet, just a thin stem with 2 perfect leaves, but it was alive. And that was enough. He'd started each morning the same way since her passing, coffee in hand, checking the sapling, listening to the sound of the creek beyond the yard. Sometimes Sable would stretch beside him, her tail swishing against the porch rail. Other mornings, Oliver would hop into his lap, curling up like an old habit. They'd become his quiet companions, keepers of an unspoken promise. In a small town like Willow Creek, grief doesn't stay sharp for long. It softens into routine, into shared glances, nods, and casseroles left on doorsteps. The neighbors still mentioned Margaret now and then, usually with a smile. They'd remember her muffins at the library, her laugh echoing across the fence, the way her house always smelled faintly of lavender and tea. For Caleb, she was everywhere. In the creak of her old rocking chair, in the way sunlight hit the maple leaves, in the stillness that filled the space between breaths. The months after loss are strange things. They don't move in straight lines. Some days the world feels normal again. You fix a fence, feed the animals, make a joke at the market. Then, one small moment, one scent or song, and the ache returns like a tide. Caleb didn't fight it anymore. He let grief come and go the way Margaret might have, gracefully, with patience. He'd begun volunteering part-time at a local wildlife rescue, the same sanctuary that had once cared for Sable. It started as a way to fill the long days, but it became something deeper. A calling that felt like a continuation of what Margaret had believed in. Kindness, loyalty, quiet healing. On his first day back at the sanctuary, he walked past an enclosure where a young bobcat crouched, injured but defiant. Its fur was mottled with the same wild beauty Sable had once carried. Caleb leaned on the fence and said softly, "Hey there, little one. We'll take care of you." The animal didn't respond, of course. But its eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them, a bridge of trust that took only a heartbeat to build. That night when he returned home, Sable brushed against his leg as if she knew. Oliver followed, curling on the porch near the new maple seedling. For the first time since Margaret's passing, the house didn't feel empty. It felt alive. Every Sunday, Caleb hosted what he jokingly called porch time. Ely, the young neighbor, would bring lemonade. Nurse Carla often stopped by after her shift. Even our Miss Owens from the hardware store came sometimes bringing a bag of nails for whatever you're fixing next. They'd sit under the maple and talk about small things mostly. Weather, gardens, the way Sable had learned to nap beside Oliver without flinching. It was a simple ritual, but it became something meaningful, a continuation of Margaret's spirit. One afternoon, Eli pointed at the little maple sapling. "It's growing faster than the one in front," he said. "You think that's because of her?" Caleb smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe because it's loved." Eli thought about that for a while, then nodded seriously. "Same thing, I guess." That evening, as the porch lights glowed soft and gold, Caleb wrote those words down in Margaret's old notebook. Loved, things grow. Always. Grief, he'd learned, isn't an ending. It's just another way love keeps talking. Every time he looked at the maple, he felt it, the steady pulse of continuity, the small miracle of something returning from loss. Margaret hadn't really gone anywhere. She'd simply changed shape. She lived in the soil that nourished the tree and the laughter that echoed across the porch, in the quiet courage of a man who'd once thought his purpose was over. Sometimes when the wind moved through the branches, it almost sounded like her voice, gentle, teasing, familiar. He didn't need to answer. He just listened. It's easy to think of legacy as something grand, names etched in stone, stories printed in history books. But most legacies are smaller, quieter, more human. They live in the way someone makes their tea, or the way they speak to animals, or the kindness they pass forward without fanfare. Margaret's legacy wasn't about fame or achievement. It was this one man learning to stay, two animals learning to trust, and a town remembering that kindness can still root itself in the unlikeliest soil. And perhaps Caleb thought that's how love keeps the world turning, not through spectacle, but through the gentle insistence of people doing good because someone once showed them how. Each spring, Caleb added something to the yard, a new birdhouse, a row of wildflowers, a bench made from the old porch boards. He called it Margaret's garden, though the neighbors still called it the widow's house. Sable and Oliver remained inseparable, their companionship almost mythic in town lore. Children would stop by the fence to watch them sunbathe together, whispering that they were proof animals can be friends, if humans just let them. When asked about them, Caleb would only smile. They just learned from the right teacher. And when the second spring came, the maple was tall enough to cast its first real shadow. The leaves were vivid green, almost luminous in the afternoon light. Caleb sat beneath it with a cup of coffee, feeling the hum of life all around him. For the first time since he could remember, peace didn't feel like stillness. It felt like motion, like breathing, like belonging. He thought about everything Margaret had given him, the porch, the laughter, the reminder that gentle things are strong too. Then he thought of what she might say now if she could see the world she'd left behind. Maybe something simple, something true. See, you were never alone. In a world that often feels too fast, too loud, too divided. Stories like Margaret's remind us of the quiet power still available to us. The power of kindness, love, and loyalty. They remind us that connection doesn't end when people or seasons change. It lingers in actions and gestures, in the things we nurture after loss. The porch, the maple, the rescued animals, all of it became more than memory. It became a kind of prayer for healing, for renewal, for faith in simple goodness. And that's what stayed, not just the seed, but the lesson. That everything we give from love has a way of coming back to us, transformed but alive. The story ends on a crisp morning a few years later. Caleb opens the front door, coffee steaming in his hand. The maple has grown tall enough now to reach the porch roof. Its leaves shimmer gold in the sun. Underneath it, Sable sleeps in the grass, her muzzle gray with age. Oliver lies beside her, purring softly. Caleb sits on the steps, breathing in the familiar air of Willow Creek, the scent of earth, of life, of memory. A new moving truck pulls up across the street. A woman steps out holding a framed photo, a bobcat standing proudly against a mountain backdrop. Caleb smiles, shaking his head. "Well, Margaret," he murmurs, "looks like the story isn't done after all." The wind rustles the leaves and the maple seems to whisper back. Love, kindness, loyalty, emotions that outlive us all. That's the seed that stayed. Before you go, take a moment to think about the people or the animals that rooted something good in you. Maybe they're gone, or maybe they're still just a call away. Either way, they've left you a seed. If this story reminded you of them, let it guide you to do something kind today. Check in on someone, plant something, forgive someone. That's how healing begins. And if you'd like to stay connected with stories like this, stories that remind us what matters most, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a little light tonight. If you want to go a step further, you can leave a super thanks or a small donation below. Every bit helps support real-life rescues and rehabilitation for wild animals. Creatures like Sable, giving them a second chance at safety and freedom. Because love doesn't end. It grows just like the seed that stayed.